It's quite disappointing regarding of the recent news that we've learned yet another round of studio closures and game cancellations, and this time done all by Xbox. Now, this news, while is indeed upsetting, wasn't entirely shocking. There were warning signs all along. What makes things perhaps not exactly a good thing, but it does make it interesting relating to what it reflects on the leadership at the Xbox. It wasn't just about individual projects being cancelled, it was just about the failure to spot problems early on and act before things spiraled out of control. I want to start with the Phil Spencer's announcement. So in his note, he said that Microsoft is making strategic decisions to focus on the strongest opportunities, and he wrote that they will, and I quote, end or decrease work in certain areas and eliminate layers of the management to become more agile. Now, he acknowledges that the changes will affect many colleagues and promises that team leaders will share specifics soon. He also mentioned that offering severances packages, health coverage, and job placements help, and encourages laid-off employees to apply for other roles within Microsoft Gaming. Now, on the surface, this reads kind of like a standard corporate layoff letter, but there's something tone-deaf about saying, and I quote, "we're doing great," while you also laying off people. It feels like a message just was crafted to hide the full extent of the cuts. Rumors suggest that the real damage is greater than what's been already announced so far, which is why Microsoft is staggering the news to avoid a single wave of backlash. Now, despite claiming, and I quote, more players, games, and gaming hours than ever before, as they say, Spencer didn't mention anything about the sales figure or the revenue. Instead, he called for tough choices for future success and said that the goal is to, and I quote, prioritize the strongest opportunities. In practice, this just means protecting what's already making money and cutting everything else out. This kind of narrow focus undermines creative risk-taking and discourages innovation. Under this strategy, we've seen deep cuts at studios behind some of the Xbox's biggest money makers, such as Studio King, known for making Candy Crush, is cutting about 10% of its staff. That's about around 200 jobs. Then there's also Raven Software, which handles Call of Duty campaigns and also was announced with its layoffs. Call of Duty is one of the Xbox's flagship franchises, and yet the team that helped define those campaigns is now downsizing. It's hard not to see this just as a move driven by short-term savings rather than long-term growth. Then there's also Zenimax Online Studios, the team that brought Elder Scrolls Online. They were developing a new MMO under a working title that leaked a few years ago, and they've been quietly hiring for ever since. And there were reports saying that more than 400 people were working on that project, and working on it even for 5 years or more. And now, well, it was cancelled, and those jobs, well, they're gone. And for fans who were excited to see ZeniMax break free of the Elder Scrolls franchise and create something new, well, this just genuinely is for a lot of people a gut punch. Rare, a studio behind Sea of Thieves, has suffered the same fate. Everwild was actually announced in 2019, was one of the most intriguing upcoming titles for a lot of people. It promises something like a fresh experience from a studio with a unique creative voice. Instead, it vanished without updates for years and years, and until, well, now it's officially dead. Rare has always been one of the Xbox's most imaginative teams, at least, but under this cost-cutting regime, they're relegated to supporting the Sea of Thieves, losing their chance to show their full potential. It's just basically they're gonna go nowhere at this case. And with the recent news relating to Romero Games, well, their funds have been completely cancelled off. Xbox is no longer supporting them. They're pretty much like, they're lost in thoughts. It was sudden, it was unforeseen, and they can't do nothing about it as well. Xbox's homegrown studios aren't exactly safe either. The initiative, formed as an all-star team to reboot Perfect Dark game, well, that is shutting down entirely. Perfect Dark itself is also cancelled, and despite a vertical slice that genuinely looked promising, it's clear that the game was far from where it needed to be, but the team had precious little to show after years of the development. This speaks to a broader problem: overrun budgets, missed milestones, and poor oversight. And when a project goes 6 years without clear progress, that should trigger a serious review, not more funding. There's also been a report that, well, that slice, that gameplay, well, that was completely fake as well. Man. Then there's also Turn 10 Studios, responsible for Forza Motorsport games, and they saw nearly half of its staff cut. Forza Motorsport has a loyal audience and solid review scores, but the last release was in 2023 and didn't exactly meet the sales expectations either. And with Horizon speeding ahead a more accessible racing franchise, Xbox chose to back the bigger hit and downsize Turn 10. This decision may make sense from a number standpoint, but it sends a chilling message. Even established teams with a history of quality work can be drastically trimmed after a single underperforming title, especially this where it screams in terms of the Xbox games. Across Xbox's game division, there's been 4 rounds of major layoffs in 18 months, studios have closed, projects have been axed, and key talent, well, they left. Zenimax president Matt Firor announced his departure, and Tim Stampler, Rare's co-founder and a creative force behind Banjo-Kazooie, left after like 35 years. That's a huge loss of institutional knowledge and passion. And when the people who built these studios start walking away, it really speaks volumes about morale and future prospects. Looking at Microsoft's broader track record, it's always been about cost control and shareholder returns. They buy studios, strip cost centers, keep the IP flowing, and tighten budgets at first signs of a trouble. They just promise a strong pipeline, talk about more than 40 active projects, and tease big releases in the coming years. Then they cut the teams that built those games. What's left is a portfolio focused on known franchises, leaving little room for new ideas. This is not how you build a creative industry. Game development thrives on experimentation, risk, and the freedom to fail fast. When every project must be hit and face the gluttony, studios become risk-aware. They stick to safe bets, sequels, live service updates. That might protect short-term revenue, but it starves the industry of innovation. For gamers, this means fewer surprises and less diversity in the kinds of stories that we see. We may get a steady stream of sequels and live service updates, but where are the new worlds to explore? Where are they? Who will take the creative leaps that define the medium? Where do studios like Zenimax Online, Rare, The Initiative, Romero Games, and Turn 10 face crippling cuts? We lose more than just games. We lose the people and the culture that make gaming vibrant. Leaderships at Xbox need to rethink the hits-only mindset. They must balance financial discipline with a genuine commitment to creativity. That means setting realistic budgets and timelines, recognizing when project needs a pivot or fresh restart, and need to be transparent with the teams before they just suddenly make these sudden decisions. It also means valuing long-term relationships with talent over short-term cost savings. Watching these events unfold, I just can't help but wonder how many promising projects never got a chance because of this environment. How many developers burned out of the cycle of feast and famine? Will we ever see even the next generation of studios emerge, or will the fear of layoffs drive people away from this industry? Xbox's promise of, and I quote, enduring success just rings hollow when half of it's paved with closures and cancelled dreams. In the end, the story is about accountability. The leaders who greenlit these projects, then they let them stagnate, must own the consequences. They need to build better process for oversight and risk management, and they need to rebuild trust with the developers and fans. If Xbox wants to be a true powerhouse of creativity, it can't just chase headlines with big acquisitions. It has to nurture those studios, give them space to innovate, and step in early when things go off track. For now, we'll have to wait and see for the full impact of these cuts and hope that some of the people affected will find new opportunities. In fact, I will argue and say, get out of the Microsoft, Teams, Studios, Xbox. Instead, go work for PlayStation, go work for someone else, because it seems like Xbox continuously, year after year, constantly has those layoffs, and it starves the creativity and the value. We'll keep our eyes open for updates on the projects that survived and for any signs of fresh talent stepping up. And as gamers, we continue to support the studios that dare to take risks and deliver experiences that surprise and inspire us. This genuinely is very, very disappointing news. I'm gonna say it, but I think that acquisitions as big as like Activision and Bethesda, well, that was a mistake. Alright, thank you so much for watching, guys. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys all and have a wonderful day.